everybody. Welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live right here on Giants.com and the Giants mobile app. John Schmeelk, Paul Dottino with you. And we'll take a bunch of your calls at 201-939-4513. By the way, guys, this offseason, you have been fantastic on the phones. Really good calls, good conversation. It's been a lot of fun. So we appreciate you being with us and just doing a really nice job with us talking Giants football and really bringing up some good ideas. That stuff that maybe we haven't thought about to talk some Giants football. So it's been a lot of fun.
You know what I think is interesting too, John? Over the last couple of weeks since the season actually ended, I've heard some new names from some new states that were not part of our regular rotation. So I think that's really cool. If those of you out there have listened to this show for a number of years, or even if you're new to it, by all means, please get involved. Give us a call, man. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, I always joke that we have like in-season callers, which I think are honestly fewer than we have off-season.
Yeah, probably.
I feel like we have a bigger variety in different guys that call on off-season because, look, it's easy to talk about the games. You can only say so much. And so I'll be honest, the last 2 years, the games haven't exactly been fun to talk about.
Correct.
It has not been great. But now, what does the off-season bring, Paul? The big H.
Yes, indeed.
Hope. So the Giants move forward here. Obviously, free agency coming. You have the draft coming after that. And then we move forward into the offseason here. Giants decide to bring back most of their regime. We talked about it yesterday, Paul. I want to give you a chance to talk about the Giants' decision to let go of Jerome Henderson and Michael Trier. They're two secondary coaches.
Yeah.
I posited yesterday, first of all, I made very clear that I think both guys are very good coaches. I think they'll pick up somewhere else really quick, and I think they'll do a nice job. That they weren't Shane Bowen guys, right? And I think Shane Bowen probably wants guys more familiar with his scheme, and maybe that can, again, I thought they did a good job with Tyron Newman last year, a rookie. Good job with Drew Phillips last year, a rookie. But they didn't get the progress they wanted out of T-Bag. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree with you in that usually in the NFL, you'll have the GM who's not going to interfere with the head coach's decision to choose his coordinators. And then a lot of times you'll have the coordinators who don't get interference from the head coach about some of the position guys that he wants on his side of the ball. And so I would agree with you. I suspect that, when Shane Bowen got here, he inherited all these guys, John.
Right.
And let's face it.
Yeah, I said yesterday, Charlie Bolin was the only other addition last year, and he wasn't with him in Tennessee. So.
Correct. So I think that, in some ways, I won't say it was expected, but you had to think not to be surprised if Shane Bowen, if he was going to come back at year 2, was going to ask for certain changes to be made because he's going to want somebody who he was connected to. Now, to be fair, John, and I had this conversation with a caller last week, the Giants' defensive scheme needs some tweaking too. They're going to need some players to play better. They're going to need some additional players on the defense. And I believe there's going to have to be some tweaking and some adjusting done with the scheme as well. And now we also know there's going to be some changes made with that side of the staff. So, there's a lot of stuff that's got to be adjusted here if the Giants defense is going to play to the level that they need.
What scheme tweaks were you thinking about specifically?
Well, something that I've said on the show before, and I'll address it again now, it's a personal preference. And I want to make that very clear. This is just a personal preference of mine, having watched, 4 decades of football and been through many, many coaches and coordinators. I'm not one who would line up my 2 edge guys when they're undersized on the ground and in the dirt. So to address it in this particular situation, there were a lot of times, bless you, John, thank you. And I don't know if there's a number on this. You may be able, I don't know, with some of the, bless you again.
Thank you.
With some of the position charts that you have access to, I don't know how many times the Giants went with a 4-man front.
We're in their base defense versus their sub.
Where they had the 2 defensive tackles down, and both Thibodeau and Burns had their hands in the dirt. So they had a 4-man defensive line with their 2 edge rushers down. Personally speaking, I would shy away from that formation as often as possible.
So what would you do when the other team puts 3 wide receivers on the field?
What I would do, I would either have the 2 guys standing up, certainly not have them down because it's my belief that Thibodeau and Burns are better off accentuating their skills as edge rushers instead of being on the down. Because I think when they're down, it gives the big, burly offensive lineman a better chance to lock them up and take them out of the picture, especially in the run game. If I'm an offensive coordinator and I see that's the way the Giants are lining up their four, I'm pounding the ball.
So I repeat my question.
Okay, so here's what I'm doing.
Yes.
The Giants, years ago, when they were running their 3-4, under Belichick, they ran 3 down linemen, and then they would put Banks and LT on the edges for a 5-man bare front. Okay? I would be fine seeing more of that front because that front is more designed to stop the run.
Right, I understand, but that takes a cornerback off the field.
So now, what you have to do, if you need to, it can be done. It's not always done, but it can be done. You'll take out an extra sub linebacker. You could do that too.
So you would play a 5-1-4 or 5-1-5.
I would consider playing 5-1-5,
okay.
but the other member of the 5
That's
would probably be a safety and not a corner. He's got to have some cover skills.
Ooh, then you need a very versatile safety there.
Sure you do.
Because I don't even think Newman would be a guy that you would put in that spot. I see him more as a traditional free safety type.
I see him more as that too. Now, this is what I'm talking about, though. There's a lot of tweaks that have to be done here. You can't do any one of these independently of another,
of course,
because you're not going to have the operation to make it work. But what I see is, and I don't know if it exists, and maybe my theory won't hold water if we have actual numbers, but I would suspect that teams ran very, very well against the Giants when they went 4 down linemen and Thibodeau and Burns were the 2 guys on the outside. That to me is just not the kind of formation that I would want to run if I'm trying to stop another team's power run game. I just think that's asking for trouble.
All right, so this is the best I got for you.
And then the other thing we saw too, John.
Yes.
We also saw 2 defensive tackles down, one of the edge rushers down, and the other guy standing up. We saw that too. And again, I think you're asking for a bully ball team to muscle you.
All right,
when you play that way.
I'm surprised by this answer. So I was able to find percentage of plays a defense had only 4 defensive backs on the field.
Okay.
So that would indicate base defense, right?
Okay.
So for the Giants, that would be a 3-4, 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebackers, including the 2 edge guys in that, and then the 4 defense.
That'll give you the numbers of guys, but it won't tell you exactly if the guys in the front 7 what they're doing or what they're playing.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not going to have 5.
But I get you.
You're not going to have 5 linebackers on the field.
No.
So you would have your 3 down defensive linemen and 2 edge guys. That's what that would be. Believe it or not, did you know the Giants had the 7th highest percentage of base defense in the NFL this year?
7th
highest, 30% of the snaps.
Okay.
The only teams higher, and I'm honestly surprised it's that high too, to be honest with you. The only teams higher are the Lions, Patriots, the Rams, the Panthers, the Colts, and the Packers.
Okay, now, part of the reason that the Giants probably did not use more of Thibodeau or Burns standing up is because they probably felt they did not have enough defensive linemen to do the job.
I agree with that too. They did not have a large number of like those guys between 290 and 305 pounds to play those other defensive tackle spots or the 3-4 DN spots.
And so I'm not telling you.
That is a pretty good number though, in terms of percentage.
But I understand maybe, you have to deal with the cards you're dealt, right? And the cards that the Giants were dealt in terms of roster, there were too many times, in my opinion, where Burns or Thibodeau had their hands down.
I don't mind them on passing downs. I do not mind them with their hand in the dirt rushing the passer. That does not. I'm fine with that.
And that's personal preference. Again, this is a subjective thing.
Have you asked Thibodeau or Burns what they prefer?
I have not talked to either one of them about this.
All right, I'm gonna have to ask them next time I see them. Because I'm not sure what their answer will be.
I think it's an interesting conversation to have, but I do know.
If I remember what Burns told me, I think I actually asked him this in the offseason. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
I believe what he told me is that I like to stand up because I can see more of what's happening. You can see the running backs. You can see read option stuff. see motion in the backfield. You can see that stuff better when you're standing up.
Mm-hmm.
But he actually thought you get better getting up the field when he was in a three-point stance. That's what I think I remember his answer was to me.
You know,
again, I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm just giving you what the answer I think.
And I'm not even saying that I'm right.
Right.
I'm simply giving you a personal preference based on defenses that I've seen over the years. And I will say this, you know, you have to work with the guys you have on the field and the guys on your roster. And to do some of what I'm suggesting, you have to have a different makeup of the roster. Because as you so well put it a few minutes ago, the Giants' defensive line room wasn't necessarily prepared to do the kind of thing that I'm suggesting. They just weren't. That's not necessarily what they had, at least earlier in the year. And you're not going to make that much of a thematic change in the middle of the season when you pick up a guy like Armon Watts.
Here's an interesting one for you.
What do you have?
And I think you'll like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I have percentage of snaps lined up in a three-point stance divided by the number of edge snaps in total. So basically, it's the percentage of time you're playing the edge and you're in a three-point stance.
Okay.
So what percentage of the plays he was on the edge do you think Brian Burns was in a three-point stance?
John,
take a guess.
I'll take a guess. 70?
Nope. 37%.
Wait a minute. You asked down.
What percentage of the plays were they in a three-point stance?
I did it in reverse.
Oh, you did it in reverse. Okay, so you were actually close then.
I'm sorry.
So you were actually close then. So he was standing up 63% of the time.
Yeah.
So I mean I think that's a pretty good percentage.
It is. Oh, it is. I would love to see the Giants' numbers, and there's no way for us to break this down.
All right, how about Thibodeau?
When he was down,
what percentage of the time do you think Thibodeau was in a three-point stance?
I think Thibodeau was in a three-point stance more than Burns.
That's correct. How much more?
Okay, so
folks, I'm just looking this stuff up now. This is interesting to me.
So this is the kind of crap that I think about at 3 o'clock in the morning.
And by the way, this was not on the rundown today. I was going to talk about the playoff games over the weekend, but this is interesting. So, here we go. No, this is good. I like this.
So Burns was 37, right? Because it was 63 the other way.
Burns was in a three-point stance this year on 37.2% of the.
I'm going to say.
I'm sorry, 37.5%.
Okay, so I'm going to say Thibodeau was probably much closer to half, closer to 50.
60.
59.8%.
And I think that probably has to do with the fact that he was probably on the strong side more, lined up tighter to the line of scrimmage would be my guess.
I think by the time we were done, I don't know how accurate this was because I think with about a month left in the season, I had seen a number where Burns's left and right flops were something like 46%.
Well, that's easy. I could tell you that. So Burns on the left side was around, if you count outside linebacker and Leo, that is 472. On the right side, 390. So not that big of a difference.
Okay. I don't know if that works out to the percentage I just said, but it was something like that, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's like 60-40.
Okay. So,
I feel like they really did that based off matchup, though, too.
I'm sure.
They would match up week to week.
Now, what I would love to see, because if there's any validity to the gut feeling that I have about those guys being down, is what would have been their rush defense effectiveness when those guys were down. I suspect, I don't know this, I suspect that it was rather troublesome. But that's just.
Do you think
hunch.
the rush defense would be worse if they were in a three-point stance?
I think the three-point stance does not suit them well. I think the Giants are better off.
Is that because, though, the three-point stance that is an indicator of what type of front they're playing, or just do you think they're better at playing the run standing up?
I think they're better overall within the scheme of the defense in terms of their overall effectiveness and the ability of the varied things that they can do if they're standing up.
Okay.
And I also believe that if you're putting Thibodeau down or you're putting Burns down, what you're basically saying is, we'd like to have a guy down. But if you're going to do that, then put a guy who's got the size and the bulk and the power to do that. And that, look.
Now, are you okay on, let's say it's 3rd and long. Are you okay with them in their hand to dirt then?
If they're 3rd and long.
Yeah, it's like 3rd and 9.
Well, how many guys do you want to play on the front?
Well, I'm assuming the offense is rolling out 3 or 4 wide receivers. So you're going to have to play. You're going to have to be a nickel or dime in that situation. So you're probably going to have a 4-man front.
If they told me that they thought that their get-off was better in that spot, then I would allow it. I would say, okay. But I think on early downs, I really, really would rather see if they're going to put somebody down, I'd rather see them get a D lineman in there. Some guy who's going to be big, bulky, powerful, and strong, and be able to hold the point and be able, because let's not kid ourselves, folks, okay? I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, but when you put a Thibodeau or a Burns down in a running situation, if I'm the other offensive coordinator, I'm going to try to muscle at them, especially with the offensive line that I've got these days. And when we talked about how Bobby Okereke, his production went down because there were too many bodies getting to the second level. And he wasn't as clean as often as he needs to be. He didn't have as much space to roam and to get to those ball carriers as he needs to be. Well, that's what's going to happen.
All right, let me throw one problem I have with your theory at you.
That's okay.
No, I think this is a good back and off. You know, we're talking X's, O's, and strategy. So if I'm going into a game and I see a team playing a lot of base defense, right? They want to play base defense, which is what you want to do. You want to play 3-4, right? And even when I go 3 wide outs, they're putting a safety out there as the DB, right? What stops me, especially if you're playing that 5-1-5 that you're talking about, right? With the safety as the second linebacker, even the linebacker there. Either way, still makes sense. What would stop me from just playing 11 personnel, which 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, and just play action passing you to death, and just attacking the middle of the field?
Well, part of this comes down to what are the all-around traits that those guys you have on the field going to be able to do. For example, when the Giants played their old 3-4 back under Belichick, believe it or not, Lawrence Taylor didn't blitz every dime. There were times he covered guys.
And we've seen Brian Burns drop in the coverage this year.
He's done that too. Now, it's something you don't want to do a ton.
And especially not against a receiver.
Okay. Not a ton. Not a ton. But if you're talking about a guy who's going to come out of the backfield, you can cover him with one of those linebackers if they've got enough coverage skills.
Depending on who the player is.
Depends on who the player is.
Like I don't think you want Tony Pollard one-on-one with one of those guys. That's probably not going to work for you.
I'm not saying that.
Right.
Now, Micah McFadden has some range and some coverage skills. He might be more willing to be able to do that if he's going to be one of the guys on the field at that point.
I don't know. Him versus like Alvin Kamara. I'm not feeling great about that.
I understand.
Right.
Well, I'm not telling you to do this all the time.
No,
I'm just saying that this is part of what I would mix in to the meatloaf. Because, see, when it was Banks and Taylor on the ends, right?
How much did they have LT in a 3-point stance when he was on the edge? Was he always
Hardly
standing? He was
ever.
always standing up?
Hardly ever.
Okay.
They would have George Martin and Leonard Marshall down on the ends. They'd have Jim Burt
in the middle,
and Banks and Taylor up on the top points.
Who replaced Martin when he retired?
Well, Eric Dorsey and George Martin used to rotate for a while.
Okay.
And then Martin eventually left. So Dorsey became the full-time defensive end. But, you know, and they had other guys. Curtis McGriff was out there, and, you know, again, Burt was the lead nose tackle. Eric Howard then came in. Eric Howard became the nose tackle.
Eric Howard, that's right.
Howard was another guy we had there. But the point is, D. Hardison was another guy Jerome Salley, all these guys, they used to just, the Giants always understood on early downs, we're going to go they used to go with, usually it was Dorsey, Leonard Marshall, and Jim Burt. That was usually their 3 down linemen up front, and they'd say, hey, baby, here's the beef. Try running against these SOBs because we're going to put LT and Banks on the edges. And by the way, you have no idea what we're going to do. Banks may cover a tight end. He may beat the living crap out of him at the line if you think you're going to run him out into the formation, or Carl's going to hold the point of attack against the run. He had 3 different things that he could do. LT was either going to come down the line and crash against the run if you decided to run away from him. If you tried to run to his side, you were dead because there was just no room. No way you're going to get around him. Or he was going to get your quarterback or cover your back out of the backfield like he did in Detroit on Thanksgiving when he ran back the pick. You had to have players who had enough of skill set and versatility, especially the guys on the edges.
Do those guys exist anymore?
That's why.
And I think Burns has it in the skill set to do that, by the way. I think athletically he certainly can.
He does.
He just, guys, edge players generally are not asked to do that anymore.
Well, this is why, John, over the years, we talk about the nomenclature and the changes in some of these names. In those days, they weren't called edge players.
They were outside linebackers.
They were outside linebackers.
Right. No,
that's
you're right.
it.
I hear you.
Now they're called edge players. In those days, an edge player without a name was basically, you guys remember you remember Kevin Green, right?
Of course.
Kevin Green was basically an edge player.
He was an edge player. He would never go into coverage. He would just rush the pass.
Never go into coverage and did not really play the run real well.
Greg Lloyd was similar to that too, right? Greg Lloyd didn't cover a lot, right?
No. Greg Lloyd from the Steelers was another one. We're talking Pat Swilling from the Saints.
Yep, another good name.
The dude was an edge rusher, and he was going straight at that quarterback every time. Forget about trying to stop the run. And that's not what the Giants did with their guys. You know, Banks one year had like 6 or 7 sacks, 8 sacks. He used to sometimes pass rush too. Sometimes they would put Taylor in coverage, and Banks would go after the quarterback.
Right.
It takes a special skill set to be able to do those kinds of things because you have to have the versatility to then change up. Because you're the offensive coordinator. Now you see that, right? You see that and you think, oh, okay, I've got the answer. I know what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden, Taylor drops into coverage. Banks decides to beat up your tight end. And now what are you going to do? Because between Burt and Leonard Marshall and either Dorsey or George Martin, they're handling your 5 guys. Those 3 guys could handle 5.
Yeah.
They were that good.
I'm just not sure you have I think with the athleticism now with tight end and running back, I think that's a tough ask for your front guys.
Right now, the Giants don't have the personnel necessarily in 2024. They did not to necessarily do what I wanted them to do. And I get that. That's why I'm not criticizing. Please, folks, understand this is not a criticism. It's a personal preference based on things that I've seen over the years. That's all. And when you see something that you knew worked, you tend to say, well, hey, is there a way to kind of replicate that again?
No, I think that's interesting.
And quite frankly, here's another option you could do too. If you're really upset with the way the rush defense was, how about you just actually go get some players to fit a 4-3? You could do that too.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Bowen changes that.
I don't think he will.
Right.
I don't think he will.
If you wanted to change that, you would probably bring a different guy in here to implement that, I would think.
Again, but it's an option. Right. It's something you could do. You say, or maybe you tell Shane, hey, Shane, do you have a 4-3 package in your book?
Right.
That we could sometimes use.
I mean, there's plenty of 4-man front stuff in this package. There's a lot of that.
There is.
It's just not a 4-3.
It's not a bulky 4-man front.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things that I stay up at night thinking about. I'm sorry.
No, I think this is, Paul, we have an hour show and we have nothing going on for 3 weeks. This is a great conversation to have. No, this is fun. This was good. I like it.
Now you understand why most people look at me like I have five arms. I mean, because it's deep stuff.
No, it is. I think it's worth the conversation. So 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Go check out the Giants Huddle podcast, folks. My interview with Sam Monson's up there right now. We kind of do a primer on the free agency class, which I'm sorry to tell you is not a great one.
Oh, and by the way, I don't want to leave out Curtis McGriff's name because he's a big...
You mentioned him.
Did I mention him?
Yes,
because I was going to say, if he ever finds me, he'd squash me for leaving him out.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So go check out the Giants Huddle podcast. Sam Monson's on. We do a free agency. Just kind of, this is what the free agency class is going to look like. Not a great free agency class. Just telling you. A couple positions, actually, cornerback's one of the positions that actually have some players there that you might be able to grab one. So I think that's maybe one spot you take a look at. So we did that. We have the Giants conversations on that as well with Madeline and Malik Neighbors after the year. And then go back a little earlier in the week, I do a draft primer as well. Who did I do the draft primer with? Remind me, Pearson. Oh, yeah. Dave Syvertson from Our Lad. So check all that out. It's on the Giants Huddle podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, giants.com/podcast. Make sure you go check that out. All right, 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. Bunch of calls on the line. Let's go to Taylor in Alabama and lead off with him. Taylor, we're going to be in your neck of the woods in a couple of weeks.
Yes. How you guys doing today?
We're good, man.
Hi.
Good. Hey, so what I was going to really say was that when it comes to the draft for us, I think at 3, if one of the top 2 quarterbacks are there, I think they're going to take them no matter what. What I would really like, though, is that if possible, if we're at 3, if Travis is there, I think the other 2 teams behind us would actually love him for their scheme. So I don't know what we could get out of it, whether it's an additional 3 from them, but I would love to trade back just those 2 spots at most to get either Abdul Carter or the defensive tackle off of Michigan. I think he's great and would pair well. So that's all, guys. You guys are great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Taylor. Appreciate it. The way I'm thinking about this right now is I do think there's a little bit of a gap between, and I'm going to take the quarterbacks, I'll push them aside for now.
You kind of have to.
We're talking about position players,
Yeah,
right?
you have to.
Because look, if the Giants like one of the quarterbacks and they're there at 3, they're going to take them. That's just the way they are. That's the way it's going to go. When you look at the position players, I have a gap once you get past Hunter and Carter. Those are the 2 guys that I think would be blue chippers in most classes that I think are really talented. They play premium positions as well. I think they have special traits to their games. And then I have a little bit of a gap before we get to the next group of guys. And for me, that's Ted McMillan, the receiver out of Arizona, Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, maybe Ashton Genty from the running back out of Boise State, guys like that. And that's kind of where my gap is right now. So I think you have those 2, and then there's a little bit of a gap. At least that's how I'm looking at it. So while I think Mason Graham is a really good pick, he'd be a safe pick, I don't know if he has the ceiling that guys like Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter have.
Carter and Hunter. Well, Hunter's my number 1 guy, so I'm with you. Carter is going to make more splash plays than Graham, I think.
A little better pass rusher for sure.
So I appreciate that angle. The thing about Graham, and I started watching him this week, John, because I'm really high on getting the 3 techniques somewhere in this draft, and I know there are going to be some available later on too.
It's a good defensive tackle draft.
But I wanted to really get a look and say, like, how special is this guy? Do you really have to take him there to get him before anybody else gets into the conversation? What I see in him is an incredible ability to shed.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like he's wearing butter on his jersey.
I think it's upper body strength too, right? He's able to extend his arms and get guys off of him.
And so the fact that he's able to cause havoc by being able to avoid the blocks, being able to get through the blocks, being able to basically get rid of guys and say, hey, just get out of my way, I'm doing this. It's pretty special, man. It is really, really special. And that to me, I think it's probably because of what I saw this year with how many big bodies were able to get to the second level on offense and prevent Okereke from doing his job. I think that's probably why right now I'm getting a little extra hungry to see a guy like Graham who is able to disrupt the offensive line's blocking scheme.
So these are my notes on Graham. This is what I wrote down on him. And when did I watch him? I watched him, I think. I watched him on November 27th. So this probably doesn't count the last month of the year or something like that.
Oh, he is slippery.
Yeah,
and you'll see it more and more the more you watch.
I mean, again, I'll find. I haven't finalized a grade on him, but I watched probably 6 games worth of plays. Great effort player. Will fight.
Motor is incredible.
Will fight through double teams. Mm-hmm. Knows how to win with his hands. To get upfield, he's a really good quick swim move. Mm-hmm. He lines up 1 technique through 5 technique. He'll even line up over the offensive tackle a little bit in some of their formations. Good burst, power, upper body and lower body. Good as a looper on stunts as a pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
And then strong. My handwriting stinks. Strong to take on run game double teams.
Yes.
And then, final note, gets off blocks.
He has pretty incredible athleticism for a guy his size to be able to do the things that he does.
I wouldn't call him an elite athlete. I'd call him a very good athlete.
Well, because
he's not Aaron Donald.
No.
Right.
No. I didn't say he's Aaron Donald.
Right.
But he does so many things well. How many times, and John, I don't know exactly how much time I spent watching the different cut-ups that I saw on him. I can honestly tell you, I don't remember seeing him taken on one-on-one and wiped out of a play. Doesn't happen.
No. He's very strong.
Does not happen.
No, he's a 6'3", 320. He is
Okay.
a very safe pick.
So, you have to double Dexter Lawrence. You put this guy next to him. You're not going to single him either.
No, look, if the Giants walk out of this draft with Mason Graham, I would not be upset.
You can't be.
He's like my third position player on the board.
That's 2 defensive linemen occupying at least the attention of 4 guys.
And Graham is a bigger need than Abdul Carter would be. But
So-
I do think Carter has special pass rush ability.
And I've seen some of Carter, and I agree with you on that too. I think in this case, I'm combining some of that need in my equation because I'm just so intrigued. I'm so intrigued. I think
I get it.
Behind Hunter, I would be so tempted to take Graham if Hunter was not my guy. I'd be very, very tempted to make Graham my second choice there.
All right, let's go to Matt in Omaha. I'm going to go to him next. What's up, Omaha?
Hey, what's going on, Paul? What's up, John?
How are you?
Hi.
Pretty good. I was calling. I want to kind of expand. I've been listening for a long time, and obviously, of course, just through this conversation of bridge quarterback and quarterbacks in the draft as well. Paul, I know you've kind of mentioned, Jimmy G being your guy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I would be kind of curious to expand upon, though, is, with Jimmy, obviously, you've talked about even having him to a 2-year deal without going with the first-round quarterback. But if you go Jimmy, and, of course, he doesn't give you even a full season, or, let's be honest, you're in Shane's shoes, you really can't go, 5-12, even 6-11, but you go with a second-round guy that's maybe potentially like a Jalen Milroe, you ideally are not going to have him play at all in 2025, but you have to hedge your bets somewhat with Shane that you can't afford to go 5-12 with even a Jimmy G because you're not going to see the next guy you drafted, hit the field. So I guess my question, too, would be, if hypothetically, and I get that obviously you're not GM, but, how strongly do you really feel about Jimmy G? It's like if your job is on the line, even as it was working for the Giants, that you would hedge your bets that you would potentially lose your job with the Giants, having Jimmy G as your quarterback for the next year or two, and not taking that, and I get it's called a home run swing, but, in a sense it might be, with a first-round quarterback, say, at 3.
Good question.
Okay. If I'm the GM and I'm sitting here and I'm saying to myself, okay, what's the best chance that I can have to not only try to win at least 6 games in 2025, because that's my target. I got to win at least 6, or I got a feeling that the owner who's already lost most of his patience is going to be really quick.
And it might be 7.
It might be 7. It might be 7. But in any event, to have any chance.
And just a note, by the way, everyone was very careful not to put a win total on that.
Correct.
For the record.
Correct.
Right.
What he's suggesting is if you're in that seat
understand.
and you're putting your own win total on it.
And by the way, I would also hope,
Yes.
and Joe Shane said he wouldn't do this, but human nature is human nature, I get it, that you're making decisions for the best long-term future of the franchise, not just to be better this year.
Correct.
But anyway, answer the question as it was
Correct.
posited to you.
I'm of the opinion that the quarterback class that we see this year is not going to be able to have 1% chance of succeeding at that level. So what I'm saying is I want a veteran guy who's going to come in here and give me a legitimate chance to win at least a half a dozen games, okay? And I'm willing to draft a second-day QB as a project. And if for some strange reason you've got to wind up because Jimmy gets hurt and you play that second or third round quarterback, depending upon how he does and if he shows something, then I'm going to go to my owner and I'm going to say, hey, you know what? We got the bridge. We got a guy who's a proven winner, who, by the way, has been on a ton of winning teams, who has a Super Bowl ring, who has actually taken a team to a Super Bowl. He's 34 years old, and I know he had injury history, but you know what? The guy brought something to us. As long as he made the team competitive.
He on a 13-4 team, though. I mean, I guess we can't be naive to the fact that, self-preservation is also human nature. I get that, right? We're going to trust that Joe Shane is also looking for the future of the Giants, right? But it's also human nature, right? He doesn't want to be fired. He wants to continue.
Of course.
On. And it looks a whole hell of a lot better if, you only win 6 games. Heck, even if you only win 5, right? But say you had that first-round QB, whether or not it's Shedeur or it's Cam, you get an opportunity for them. You only win 5 games, but that quarterback got in either because of necessity of injury or you did allow them to maybe play out the final 4 games. Kind of like an Eli. Obviously, Eli started earlier than we thought and didn't necessarily play that good, but
kind of like Mike. Matt, how about this? Kind of like what the Falcons did with Michael Penix this year, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yeah,
exactly. You had a very, very proven guy as well in Kirk Cousins, but it's a lot easier to sell the future to Mr. Mara, of course, if, say, you have a Cam Ward that comes in, plays the final 4 games. Sure, there's struggles. Maybe there's mistakes with interceptions because, of course, the caliber of defenses and teams we're playing next year. But you do see the explosiveness. You see that first-round potential, and you see the reason why he still went in the first round as opposed to, like, a Dart, a Milroe, a Dillon, things like that, where you might not even see really any growth in those 4 games because they're so overmatched by those defenses that we're going to face in 2025.
It would be my gamble. And look, there's
Matt, by the way, great call, great question.
It is.
Appreciate it.
There's no right answer here. It's strictly subjective because time will tell what the results are. What I'm looking at is to try to recreate the Kurt Warner situation where you bring the veteran in here who's got a lot of pelts on his belt, as Bill Parcells used to say, and makes you respectable. And if you've got the developmental guy, the 2nd or 3rd round pick behind him, in Eli's case, he was the number 1 who was traded for.
That was not a developmental.
That was not a developmental. No. You knew Eli was going to be the guy.
Correct.
Okay? Here, what you do is you play Jimmy, and if he gets you competitive, and then for whatever reason, he gets hurt, or you decide you want to see the young kid that you drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round, then you put him in. And I don't think ownership is going to hammer you for that. I think they will give you some room. So what I'm looking at, I'm trying to play the possibilities here the best I can. I think that's a hell of a hedge because I think it gives you a chance to survive. I really believe that. That's my opinion. If you get respectability out of Jimmy and he gets hurt, or you make the change to the young guy because you think he's the future. This is if you take a second-day quarterback. I think you're going to get that year. You're going to buy that year for yourself if you're the GM. That's what I'm thinking. I'm counting on it. I think you'll get that. If Jimmy plays well,
Jimmy G better not get hurt too early in the year.
Well, if he gets hurt in week 2, then obviously you're just gonna have to force feed the kid, and that's gonna be bad. But there's no surefire answer here.
No, there
isn't.
isn't. That's true.
There's nothing that's going to cover all your bases.
I mean, look, you could draft the guy at 3, and they're just look at Bryce Young. They might just not be ready in year 1, and it might just look really bad. That's a chance of that happening too.
Eli wasn't ready either at the start of 2004. He wasn't.
Eli has said though, those however many games he started that year helped prepare him
for the next year.
Correct.
And that's why Tom sat him so long. Mm-hmm. He wasn't ready. Ward and Sanders are not going to be ready week 1. I'm sorry. We already have what's known as a devalued quarterbacks class in this draft. To think that either one of those guys is going to do what has happened in Washington this year is absolutely a fantasy.
I mean, I'll say this.
It really is.
You never know. We've all been surprised before, but I would say it's unlikely.
Anything can happen, right, John? Mm-hmm. All right. So if you go the way I'm talking about, and you've already been on the record as saying you'd go bridge too.
I mean, I would get a 1, but I'm not
Okay.
ruling out a quarterback at 3. I've said that many times.
That's true too. But you still would get a bridge, even though you would be willing to take a quarterback at 3. You're still on board with getting a bridge.
Yeah, I want to leave free agency with a quarterback I would trust to start in week 1.
There you go. All right.
Yes.
So in concept, we're just tweaking some of the particulars, but we have the same concept in mind. Now, if Jimmy plays well, then you just sit the guy and redshirt him. Nothing wrong with that. And then you worry about going into the following season. Hey, let's have a nice competition in training camp and see who's the number 1. Fine. If things go poorly, right? Now, we've talked about how many wins do you have to get to keep the administration intact. We don't know what that number is. But if things go badly, this is why you now have to be ready to then draft the real guy in 2026, which is why I've added the caveat, which says if you're at 3, you can't be afraid to trade with the Raiders at 6 and tell them, I'm taking your 1 in 26, I'm taking your 2 in 26.
Wow, that is
yeah.
big price.
Hey, Raiders, you want Shedeur Sanders? He's sitting there at 3.
You're assuming he's there.
I'm saying if one of those 2 quarterbacks is there at 3, I'm trading out. Tell the Raiders, you're at 6, I'm at 3, okay? You want one of those quarterbacks? Hopefully it's Sanders, because supposedly there's something going down with the Raiders and Sanders. You want him? I'll take your 1 and your 2 next year. And that's not unrealistic. That is absolutely realistic based on how high.
It cost the Jets 3 2s to move up 3 spots.
That's right.
So 1 and 2 is a lot more than that.
It's realistic, though. It's not out of the question.
No,
And
I would not say it's out of the question.
And I'm trying to squeeze them for that. Because if I do that, now I go to 6. I've already told you about the defensive guys that I love in the top 6 of the draft.
If I'm sitting there at 3 and it's Shedeur Sanders and I can get a 1 and a 2 next year, I would make that trade.
And guess what now?
If it's 3 2s, I don't know if I would do it.
I'm not doing it for 3 2s. I need the 1 and the 2.
How about a 1 and a 3?
Fine.
You would just want the 1.
Absolutely.
Okay. Of course, because that could be a top 5 pick next year.
Bingo.
Absolutely.
That's exactly why.
I totally get it. That's probably why the Raiders won't want to do that. But yes, if you can somehow get a 1 in next year's draft, I would be okay with that.
You got to be able to do that. So now I go to 6 and I got high defensive ranked players on the board still, right? I got high guys I could still get.
Well, yeah, 6 you're guaranteed to get either Carter, Hunter, or Graham.
Right?
Well, no.
Or maybe I think Will Johnson also potentially at 6. You can get him there too.
Yeah, because you would have the 2 quarterbacks and those 3 would go 1 through 5, right? I mean, Graham could still be there at 6.
Possibly.
I'm not a big Will Johnson guy, but yes.
That's okay.
I see what you're saying.
Now, how else have I set myself up? Now I got that extra 1 next year. I can either A, if the Raiders turn out to be bad, I've got another high 1 because it'll be their pick, or I've got that extra 1 and 2 or 3, whatever you decided on, in my pocket to help now move up if I have to.
I mean, you potentially could have 2 top 10 picks next year.
Yeah. You never know.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, if there is somebody in that quarterback class in 2026 that I got to go get, guess what? I got stuff in my pocket to pull out. I can go get them.
Your plan has a lot of merit to it.
I'm using.
I don't know about the name for the bridge quarterback, but we could push that aside.
And that's okay.
That's not important. But
that's okay.
Your plan has logical merit to it, and I don't necessarily even disagree with it, to be totally honest with you.
I
just don't know if you can get that 1 there. If you can, you do it, and I run to the bank and I do the trade, because then, look, you're setting yourself up like the Bears did last year, right? Where you got your pick and the Panthers pick, they get a Dunze and Caleb Williams.
Yes.
You're feeling very good about that.
Absolutely.
And the Raiders, to be honest, they don't have a great track record of winning a lot of football games.
No, they don't.
And they're in a very tough division.
So what I've done with this plan is I've hedged my bet on 25. I'm allowing myself room to get good players and also setting myself up for 26 if necessary.
Paul, I think it's a good plan, and I don't disagree with it.
I've spent a long time trying to figure this out. Trust me.
Pearson, you can screen one more. I'll make sure I get through 15. Let's go to Marty and Mount Hawking. He's up next. Hey, Marty.
Hey, how you doing, John?
What's
hey,
up?
Paul, how are you?
Hi.
John, you got a good year going down to the All-Star games this year. There's a lot of players that are going to be there, especially the juniors. I hope you have enough help down here to watch all these guys.
I'm going to be very solo at the All-Star games. I will have a lot of help at the Combine. Shrine has lost some guys, which has taken some luster off that game, but the Senior Bowl is going to be awesome. We might set a new record. Last year, the Senior Bowl had 10 first-round picks. I think you might have more than that this year. It's going to be a great week.
Yeah, it seems that way. I have to disagree with you, though. I think if I was the third pick and the quarterbacks were gone, I think I would have to go defense, and I think I would go with Abdul Carter because we got to look at what's going to be happening with Thibodeau the next year or so. It'd be nice to have somebody waiting in the wings.
I would have no problem with Abdul Carter, Marty. Zero.
Absolutely. He's absolute blue chipper, and there's nothing wrong with taking that guy.
Well, I'm glad to see we're all on the same page. So, hey, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the inauguration, and let's go Giants.
Thanks, Marty. Appreciate the call. Let's go to Coach Marvin in Delaware. He's up next. Hey, Coach.
Hey, how you guys doing?
We're good.
Oh, that's good. I'm pretty much agreeing with both of you guys. You got that. First, I wanted to start off with when Paul was talking about the front line, and I'm with Paul on that. Somehow we got to figure out something. You got 2 down DTs in the line of scrimmage, and I look at Thibodeau and Burns. I see edge guys. I don't see defensive ends, and they playing defensive ends. Mm-hmm. And on the side of John saying, would I play them on passing downs? I like that look on passing downs. I don't have a problem with them with that 4 down lineman on passing down, but as a base, it's just getting beat up a little bit, and I think they do need some beef. I don't know how you do it. It's like you were saying, John. It's tough to go into a 3-4, and these guys are playing nickel. How you going to do it? The only thing you can probably think is how do we get some real defensive ends to play those positions? I don't know how they actually do it, but they're going to have to figure that out. We're not going to be able to do it for them. They're going to have to do it.
Yeah, the personnel right now, Coach Marvin, it doesn't quite fit what you or I would like to do there. It just doesn't right now.
No, it doesn't. No, and I agree with you 100%. I don't like that alignment, and I haven't liked it all year. Mm-hmm. I like those 2 guys. I like Thibodeau, and I like Burns, but what they're asking them to do in that alignment, very difficult for them. And you might be, and I think you're right. I think teams really, that gave us problems in stopping the run, those 2 issues. So hopefully they can address that. As far as you guys talking about the draft, the trade, it sounds good. I'm with John, with you, Paul. It sounds good. You got to get a 1. And I think in your case, Paul, you might be right. You might get a 1. The only reason, John, I think he'll get a 1 is because you're talking quarterback.
No,
if you're
that's
talking
fair.
any other position, I think it'll be tough to get next year's 1. And I think they would bite on it. I think the Vegas, they're gamers. They're gonna get whatever they want to get. You need to get what they want. So I think you can swindle them into anything, So, but my thing is I think you have to have a sit down with ownership, and for me, I would have to get my boundaries because I feel that my job is on the line based on what was said in the closeout when Mr. Mara was talking. Get the quarterback fixed, get the line fixed. So the pressure on me is, do I take care of what he wants me to do, or what do I believe in what we're going to do? And he pays the check. So I might be panicking and say, well, he wants a quarterback, so we got to take 1 just in case. If it's me and I like Ward, and if Ward is gone, I may not take Sanders. I like Sanders, I really do, but I think you have to have an offensive line, a good lineup for him.
I agree
because
with that.
He's a very good passer. He anticipates very well. But if you don't have an offensive line, what we saw in Colorado, we will see in New York. And I don't want that. I'm running. I think in the bowl game, he must have had a 20, 25-yard sack in that game. I couldn't believe.
Yeah, and the problem with Coach with him,
he got up to,
he when he feels pressure, he tends to run backwards, which is as a quarterback you can't have.
BYU ate him for lunch.
Oh,
to be honest,
they did.
Yeah,
it was really not a good audition tape for the NFL.
No, it was a bad one, and I watched both those games. I watched Cam Ward and his game. Cam Ward had a good first half, but the Sanders, I like him, I really do, but we don't have the personnel to play with him because he's a guy that's trying to make the big play, and I don't need guys running around trying to make big plays when there is no big play there. So it'll be hard for me to move down to that sixth spot. That goes back with John. I'm with John on that. There's only two guys I see that can be impact players. And I told you this before, Paul. We have good players, but we don't have those impact players. Neighbors has a possibility of being one. We don't have enough of those guys. And these two guys, Hunter and Abdul, are impact players. I feel they're impact players. And I think that's why there's a gap in between where John was talking about, because those are two impact players. I misspoke last week when I was talking about Ty Robinson going, one of my favorites. I didn't mean to make it sound like he was a first rounder. I was thinking late in the first round, or if I can get him in the second round, I think he'll be a pretty good impact.
Coach,
player.
in fact, and appreciate the call. I was going to bring that name up to Paul as one of those defensive tackles. Have you watched Ty Robinson from Nebraska yet?
I have not. Like him. I like him, huh?
6'6", 310.
Okay.
Big guy, penetrates, plays 1 through 5, out to 5 technique.
Okay.
I think he will be a guy that intrigues you, and I'm with Coach. I think that's an end of round 1. And this draft might be mid-round 1, top of round 2, top of pick.
See, the one thing, and I've made this clear too, I would think long and hard about taking Hunter at 3. If the two quarterbacks go 1 and 2, Hunter is probably the guy I'm going to pull the trigger on at 3, probably. But Coach, I'm not 1,000% sold on making the trade that I proposed. That trade is more or less the hedge if you've decided in your mind that you're not going to take a quarterback there, that you're going to wait to the second day and you want to help yourself for next year as a safety net. That's the reason I proposed that deal.
Right. No, I'm with you on that. All right, James in California is up next. Hey, James.
Hey, guys. I love your comparing bridge quarterbacks to like the Brooklyn Bridge and the Gothels Bridge.
Isn't that great? I like that too, John. That was really good.
I think we'll have to sit down and actually create like a tier chart so we have this like really defined. Brooklyn Bridge will be number 1, just for the record. Sorry, Pearson. I don't know what kind of bridges you have up in Boston. But...
I would think Golden Gate.
Sorry, Brooklyn.
Wow.
I'm biased. I don't care.
That's all right.
Go ahead. It's awesome.
All right, well, I got a new one for you then, because I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo is one of those bridges of Madison County. You know those?
Really?
They look pretty, but they're not that practical.
Okay. It's all right.
That's actually really funny.
You can pick a different bridge. You don't have to like the bridge that I'm on. It's not a problem.
See, Paul likes the fancy bridges.
Yeah, exactly.
He likes the fancy bridges. Okay. Jimmy G is a hamster.
But that actually goes into my main point where, Schmeelk, I'm kind of with you at this point where I think as far as picking a quarterback, like upside is everything. Like it's all that matters at this point. And at the same time, like you gotta throw your darts, and we gotta throw them now. Like we can't wait for a year. And so my thing with that is it's like, look, draft a quarterback I kind of hate that word conviction, but hey, if these guys have conviction, draft a quarterback like later. Like if you can move into the end of the first round or the second round, if there's any of those guys that Dable really likes, Milroe, Dart, whoever. I don't know, but whoever, like I'm all for that. But what I would absolutely do, which I think, Paul, you said you would absolutely not do, but what I would do, and I would do it right now, is I would trade for Joe Milton. And I think, Schmeelk, did you say you'd have to give up a third round for that?
Charlie called up and said he would only take a third round for Joe Milton, and I thought that was a little rich.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see.
That is a bit
you
much.
Get it for a 4?
I don't think they're going to take a 4 for him, to be honest.
I don't know. I'm not. Look, I don't know what the Patriots think about Joe Milton from what they've seen in practice. I think they know a lot more about him from how he operates in the building than what we know just watching him play one game at the end of the year.
James, let me make 2 points here. Number one, I'm not against Joe Milton. But Joe Milton, if you bring him into the roster, you're seeing him as a bridge. I'm not seeing him as a bridge. I would be willing to get him.
He would be your.
He's a project for me.
He would be your. Instead of picking a quarterback in round 2 or 3,
correct,
he would be the replacement for that.
And I think John and I agree.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, John and I would not make Milton the bridge. So if you're going to make him the bridge instead of Garoppolo, I think you are sadly off base.
I would rather have Joe Milton as my bridge than Garoppolo.
You would. Yeah. You're going to. Oh man, don't see that one at all.
Well, at least Joe Milton's not going to fall apart after 4 weeks.
Yeah. Well, how many Super Bowls and wins has he had in the NFL?
More than Jimmy Garoppolo in the last 2 years.
Oh, my goodness. All right, anyway, but the second point is, going back to James' other point about at least the willingness not to have to take a first-rounder, there have been 27 starting Super Bowl quarterbacks in the NFL since the 2000 season, okay? 15 of them were first-round picks. The other 12 were taken either later than that or undrafted.
Wait, are you counting Tom Brady all the times he won a Super Bowl?
What I'm counting is there were 27 different starting quarterbacks. So he gets counted once.
Okay.
He gets counted once. There are 27 different starting quarterbacks in the Super Bowl since the 2000 season. That's a fact. 15 of them were taken in the first round. The other 12 came after the first round. You know what that means? Only 56% of the starting quarterbacks since 2000 came out of the first round. So you're absolutely right. You don't have to take one in the first round. You don't have to take one at number 3 to be your future. You're absolutely right. On that, we totally agree.
Paul, do you want me to bring out all the numbers of the chance of success for quarterbacks picked in rounds 1, 2, and 3? I can do it for you. It's not going to go well for you.
The Super Bowl stat I just quoted is fact. It's fact.
I understand it's fact, but you're cherry picking one stat.
I don't have it in my laptop. I have it at home. I have all the first round successes. I have the amount of guys who have been Pro Bowls, who've been Super Bowls, who've been All Pros. I have multiple. I spent days on this.
And the chance of finding a good quarterback in the first round is exponentially higher, especially in the top 10, than outside of that.
Oh, there is no doubt. Your odds of getting...
Thank you, James. Appreciate the call, by the way.
Yeah, your odds of getting a Pro Bowl or all NFL quarterback is much better in the top 10 than it is later on. I'm not denying that. But the Super Bowl number, when people say all the time, they'll go, well, I don't want just a good guy. I want a guy who gets to the Super Bowl. I can't deny the fact. 15, first round. 12, not first round. It's only 3 more.
But there are 6 other rounds.
Right.
It'll be harder to find that person.
Well, actually, think of this. There's a much wider scope to pick from.
Well, I think that's the point. Like, if you're looking at number of players taken, to Pearson's point, if you look at the number of quarterbacks taken between rounds 2 and 7, it's probably 3 or 4 times higher than the number of quarterbacks picked in round 1. Hence, the percentage point that I'm making still stands.
I think it's just harder to nail the pick because there's so many.
That's not a dispute.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Because the point comes down to, it's not where you pick a guy, it's who you pick, which is the ultimate factor. It's who you pick, not where you pick him. That's ultimately what determines whether or not you win.
Well, right, of course, but the players you have to choose from are not going to be as good once you get outside the top 10 at the quarterback position.
Unless you find them.
Yeah, but it's extremely hard.
Again,
well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to count the number of quarterbacks selected in rounds 2 through 7 over the past 10 years. And we're going to see how many of those guys had success. And you're going to see it's like a 10% chance.
I'm not doubting that. That's not the point that I'm making. I understand the percentage goes down. I'm in total agreement.
Way down.
The percentage you have to hit.
Well, of course, but it gets... Yeah,
I mean, Joe, for instance, and this goes way back...
Well, that's great. Here's my financial plan. I'm going to win the lottery. You have to hit. You have to hit. But that's the plan.
God.
But you got to hit. It's the same concept.
No, not really.
It's like, I'm going to take my $10,000. I'm going to try to pick one stock.
It's not billions to one like the lottery is.
I'm going to pick, fine. I'm going to go pick the right Bitcoin. All right? that goes up 2,000%.
It's not billions to one. You know, for example, right? For example, when the Niners drafted Joe Montana, he was not a first-round pick. He was a fourth-round pick.
Can we do something within the last 20 years, please?
No, I'm just taking him as an example because
but it's a different world 40 years ago. Let's pick a player in the last 20 years, please.
Sure, it's a different world. And that's why I only went back to 2000 with my chart. I don't have it here. I'd love I'd love to call this up right now and give you all the names.
No, I got
I'd love to do it.
I mean,
I can't though.
I could tell you who the Super Bowl guys are. It's going to be Purdy. It's going to be Jalen Hurts. It's going to be Garoppolo. It's going to be Matt Ryan was a first-round pick. Cam Newton was a first-round pick. It's going to be Russell Wilson in that group. It's going to be Trent Dilfer in that group. It's going to be Rich Gannon in that group.
You're grabbing them.
How many of those guys are you confident on your team you're winning a Super Bowl with?
They got there.
How many guys of that group consistently got their teams deep in the playoffs?
It's
one shot. That's fine. Anyone could do something once.
No, but all those guys you just mentioned, those guys won a ton of games in this league. And
Trent Dilfer won a ton of games?
He's the outlier.
He was actually a first-round pick.
He's the outlier. Yeah, he was.
Where was Joe Flacco picked?
Joe Flacco was a first-round pick.
Yeah, he was a first-round. Mm-hmm. And he's got a ton of wins on his belt, too. He's been to the playoffs a few times. You can win. You can win with guys who are not first-round quarterbacks.
I understand.
That's the only point.
If you cannot bank your future at the position on that. Like, if you get lucky, like the 49ers weren't banking their future on Brock Purdy.
Look,
the Cowboys weren't banking their future on Dak Prescott. The Seahawks went out there and spent big money on Flynn.
Yes,
the year
they
drafted Russell Wilson.
Right.
They weren't banking their future on Russell Wilson.
But nonetheless,
the Patriots had Drew Bledsoe. They weren't banking their future on Tom Brady.
But these other guys, they did get them there. And look, as much as I don't like Dak Prescott, the Cowboys obviously gave him the entire Fort Knox to bring him back
because he proved that he could do it on the field. But you don't
pick the right guy.
How long do you wait to see if it's the right guy?
If you get the bridge quarterback, you can wait as much as 2 years.
Oh, that's crazy. You're going to be... No, you can't wait for 2 years on a day 3 quarterback.
No. If you take a guy in the second or third round...
Sorry, Pearson.
Take a guy in the second or third round this year.
The Casey days will still be there.
Okay? And your bridge guy is winning. There's nothing wrong with making that kid sit for not only 25, you may even have him sit in 26.
No, but that's fine. But you can't say, I'm not going to pick this quarterback I like in the first round because I got this 4th round guy that I'm developing.
Oh, no. Absolutely not. I agree with you. I agree with that. Sure.
Okay, I think we might be arguing past each other here a little bit.
I think we're on different roads. We're not even, we're on different roads. We're not even talking about the same concept, I don't think, at this point. But that's okay.
To me, it's good to... this is how I'll phrase it from my point of view, and then we'll say goodbye.
Yes.
I'm always fine picking quarterbacks late as flyers. Having those guys on my roster will not in any way, shape, or form determine whether or not I'm going to draft a quarterback early in a draft.
I concur with that, which is why, and maybe this is the best way to clear this whole thing up. If you take one in the second or third round this year, and then you see in 26 that there's a guy that you are all in for, you can absolutely go get him if you have to, especially if you've acquired the extra draft capital in the trade that I proposed.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with doing that.
The way you were phrasing it, I thought you were literally putting your future quarterback on like a day 2 or day 3 pick.
Absolutely not.
And we're on the same page.
Okay, we're good.
See? You talked this out.
We just had to get to grandma's house.
Yes,
that's all.
We did.
We're good.
Good. And now people are going to get less mad at you on Twitter because
that's
good, which is good.
That's good.
You probably have everyone blocked by now anyway, but either way.
I've got a host of the Angry Mob blocked already.
Guys, thanks for being with us on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. For Paul Dottino, I'm John Schmeelk. Have a great weekend. No show on Monday for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I'll be on at least one day next week. I can't do Friday now because I'm traveling down to Frisco. I might switch on to Wednesday. We'll see. I'm with you a couple days next week. Paul's with you a bunch. SciTac. have a surprise person come on next couple weeks too. So keep that in mind as we move forward on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Until then, have a great weekend.